Welcome back to Beyond the Old West, where we dive into the raw, untold stories of Wild West history. When we think of women in the Old West, we often imagine them as strong, independent figures. But the reality was far more brutal and shocking than any movie could depict. These women didn't just survive, they fought tooth and nail for their survival in a world that was dominated by men, and often they paid a heavy price. Today, we're uncovering the top 5 shocking things women had to endure in the Old West. And trust me, these stories will shock you. From enduring violence and mistreatment to fighting for their rights and disguising themselves as men, these women faced unimaginable challenges. The Wild West history is filled with courage and heartbreak, but these women's stories are often forgotten or overlooked. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all the gritty truths we uncover about the Wild West history. And let us know where you're watching from and what part of this Wild West history surprised you the most. Don't blink. You won't believe what these women had to endure. Let's get started with Top 1. Women who disguised themselves as men to avoid violence and join the fight. In the rough and lawless Wild West, survival was a matter of ingenuity, and many women found themselves in situations where they had to take drastic measures. Some of the most shocking stories involve women who disguised themselves as men to escape violence, gain more freedom, or even participate in battles they had no other way of joining. One of the most famous examples is that of Sarah Bowman, also known as the heroine of the Mexican War. She traveled with her husband, a soldier in the Mexican-American War, but when he died, Sarah didn't go home. Instead, she took up his identity, dressed as a man, and continued to fight alongside the troops. Sarah wasn't alone in this. Other women, like Jenny Hodgers, who went by the name Albert D.J. Cashier, disguised themselves as men and became part of the Union Army during the Civil War. These women were driven by necessity. In a world where women had very few rights, pretending to be a man allowed them to escape the crushing limitations of their gender. They could avoid the constant threat of violence, live more freely, and even fight for their country. The dangers were immense, and getting caught could lead to harsh punishments. But their bravery and sheer will to survive left them part of the Wild West history that is often untold. Imagine the level of courage it took to assume a completely different identity, live among men, and fight in dangerous conflicts, all while keeping their true identity a secret. Their stories are a testament to the fierce determination of women who refuse to be limited by the gender expectations of their time. Top 2. Women who took justice into their own hands against sexual violence. In the chaotic and lawless world of the Wild West, women didn't always have the luxury of waiting for justice to be served. The constant threat of sexual violence was just one of the many dangers they faced. But some women chose to take justice into their own hands in ways that would shock you. Their stories are raw, brutal, and powerful, showing a side of the Old West that Hollywood rarely dares to explore. One such story is that of Maddie Silks, a notorious madam in Denver. When a client attempted to assault her, Maddie didn't rely on the law or wait for help. She acted swiftly and fatally shot the man in self-defense. Her courage in protecting herself from the threat of sexual violence sent a powerful message. Survival came before any societal expectations of women at the time. Similarly, Belle Starr, the infamous Bandit Queen, is said to have taken matters into her own hands when faced with sexual assault. Though the details are murky, the legend persists that she killed a man who had wronged her, further cementing her reputation as a force to be reckoned with in the Wild West. These women didn't just survive, they fought back, protecting themselves in a world where such acts of violence were tragically common. Their stories highlight the grim realities of life in the Wild West, where law and order were often absent. and personal retribution was sometimes the only way to find justice. Top 3. The battle against gender norms and expectations. In the Wild West, women faced brutal societal pressures that kept them in rigid roles. Yet some dared to defy these expectations at a tremendous cost. Their battles weren't just physical, but emotional, enduring years of discrimination and societal rejection. Take Annie Oakley, whose fame as a sharpshooter was overshadowed by society's refusal to accept that a woman could wield a rifle as well as any man. She spent her life proving her worth, but every victory came with the pain of rejection from a world that couldn't see beyond her gender. Calamity Jane took this struggle even further. A woman who embraced the roughest life of the frontier, she endured the trauma of being constantly judged and misunderstood. Her courage was met with mockery, her strength with ridicule, and yet she persisted, her heart heavy with the scars of living outside the norms. Belle Starr, the infamous bandit queen, embodied rebellion. Running a criminal empire, she constantly faced not just lawmen, but a society that was disgusted by her existence. She fought for power, but it came with relentless isolation, judgment, and violence. These women didn't just struggle against the law, they fought against an entire world that sought to suppress them, breaking every expectation placed on them at a painful price. Their stories are a reminder of how women in the Wild West endured unimaginable hardships just to claim their place. Do you think you could have survived such a battle? Top 4. The struggle of poor healthcare and hygiene. In the Wild West, women often faced unimaginable hardships, not just from the dangers of the land, but from the complete lack of proper healthcare and hygiene. Giving birth alone in a cabin, far from any doctor, was a common experience. Without trained midwives or doctors, women often had to rely on themselves, and the results were often disastrous. The methods women had to use for self-care were painfully rudimentary. For childbirth, women had to make do with what they had. There were no clean sheets, no medical equipment, and often no sterilized tools. Women would rely on old family remedies, such as using boiled water to wash wounds, or making their own herbal concoctions to help ease the pain. If a woman needed a bath, she would usually bathe in a tub with water boiled over a fire. And even then, soap was a rare commodity. Some women even resorted to using animal fat mixed with ashes as a crude form of soap, which was hardly effective in cleaning or preventing infections. For sanitation, women were left with little more than primitive outhouses, often shared by entire communities. Many had to use homemade cloths or torn fabric as makeshift sanitary pads, which could easily cause infections if not changed frequently. In the absence of toilet paper, leaves, corn cobs, and old newspapers were the go-to alternatives. These primitive practices made the chances of illness or injury significantly higher, and infections from poor hygiene were widespread. The lack of proper healthcare and hygiene in the Wild West put women's lives at constant risk, and many didn't survive the brutal, unsanitary conditions. Their strength was tested daily, not just by their circumstances, but by the sheer neglect of their health and well-being. What would you have done to survive under these dire circumstances? Top 5. Women and the risk of abduction. In the brutal landscape of the Wild West, one of the most terrifying threats women faced was the constant risk of abduction. Whether by Native American tribes during times of conflict, or by outlaw gangs seeking ransom or forced labor, women were often seen as valuable commodities to be taken. This risk was ever present, especially in remote frontier towns or isolated homesteads. One of the most shocking and lesser-known facts about abductions in the Wild West was the psychological toll it took on women. Many were taken from their families and communities, often without warning, and were held captive for months or even years. Mary Sutherland, for example, was kidnapped by a Native American tribe and forced to live in their camp. Despite the hardship and cruelty, Mary survived by learning their ways and eventually escaped. Her story, like many others, highlights the resilience of women who endured unimaginable hardship. In some cases, the captors would demand a ransom, forcing the victim's family to choose between paying a high price for her release or leaving her fate uncertain. This created a constant state of fear, as families never knew when their loved ones might be taken or what might happen to them. What makes these abductions even more chilling is the fact that women had very little recourse. Law enforcement was scarce, and often the authorities were either unable or unwilling to take action. Women had to rely on their own courage and resourcefulness to survive these traumatic experiences. The Wild West was a time of lawlessness, danger, and constant uncertainty. For women, it wasn't just about surviving the violence of gunfights or the harshness of the frontier. It was about enduring personal battles that most could never imagine. From the risk of abduction to fighting for basic human rights and dignity, these women navigated a world where survival meant living through unimaginable hardships. Their strength, resilience, and courage weren't just marks of their time. They were the foundation upon which the legends of the West were built. These untold stories give us a glimpse into the real struggles faced by women in the Old West, stories that are often overlooked in the myths and legends that have shaped our understanding of that era. If you found these stories surprising or shocking, be sure to hit that follow button for more untold tales from the Wild West. There's so much more history to uncover, and the brave women who lived it deserve to have their voices heard. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the untold realities of the Old West, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more stories from Beyond the Old West, where the real stories are always wilder than the myths. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. The Wild West history isn't just about the men who shaped it. It's about the women who fought to survive against all odds.